Disney Doctor Who, Season 2, Episode 1, The Robot Revolution, also known as Planet of the Incels, written by Russell Davies. The story opens 17 years ago, with a young man and a young woman on a park bench under the stars. It is the occasion of the young woman's birthday, and her very awkward boyfriend Alan has given her a gift. She rips off the paper as he tries to tell her that she could actually save the paper for later. Inside is a framed certificate. He has bought her a star, which is now in her name, Miss Belinda Chandra. Belinda asks, does it have to say Miss? Alan asks if she's married. She says no, and he tells her then it has to say Miss. Belinda apologizes and tells Alan that this is the nicest thing anyone has ever done for her and thanks him. He then leans in and they share the world's most awkward kiss. The next scene takes place 17 years later. Belinda is now working as a nurse in a hospital. It is the end of her shift. So when another nurse tells Belinda that a doctor is looking for her, Belinda goes home instead of trying to locate the doctor. The Disney doctor is at reception trying to get Belinda's home address, but the receptionist refuses to give it to him. So the Disney doctor uses his sonic device to steal the information and causes the whole hospital to suffer a blackout. At home, Belinda appears to live with two annoying roommates, one of whom doesn't even know her name. Belinda goes to bed, her star certificate is hanging on the wall. The room begins to shake, and we see that some sort of spaceship is landing outside. Robots from the spaceship break into the house and start wrecking the place. They're looking for Her Majesty, Miss Belinda Chandra. She is told that she will be coming with them. She asks, what will happen if she doesn't? And the robot shoots and kills the cat just outside the door. Belinda says, you killed the cat. The robot replies, the cat is irrelevant. Belinda responds that it wasn't her cat. The robot states that the cat is still irrelevant. The robot tells Belinda they need her as their queen. Another robot has retrieved her star certificate from her bedroom wall. Robot 1 pulls the certificate from its frame, and they head for the spaceship. In the yard, the next-door neighbor has come out to see what's happening. And what do you know? It's Mrs. Flood from the previous season. When Mrs. Flood sees the Disney doctor, she hightails it out of there and breaks the fourth wall. The Disney doctor was just a little too late, and the robots have taken off with Belinda. The Disney doctor follows in his TARDIS. Belinda tells the robots that they don't have the right person, that it was Alan who bought the star for her, and they should go get him. She hasn't seen him in 16 years. She thinks he moved away, and he owes her 50 quid. Belinda demands that someone tells her what the hell is going on. She appears to glitch several times, and we see something similar happen to the doctor in the TARDIS. Belinda and the robots land, and Belinda is greeted by Sasha 55, who explains that they obey their robot overlords, the Miss Belinda Chandra bots, in all things. Some aircraft fly overhead, and Sasha 55 explains that some rebels have started a riot, and the aircraft will be dropping Miss Belinda Chandra bombs on them. Sasha 55 tells Belinda the robots must be obeyed, and in a lower volume says, please help us. They head into the throne room, and a little floor-polishing robot comes up to Belinda to polish the floor before her. People and robots are lining both sides of the hall. Belinda walks by them, and we notice the Disney doctor is a member of this group. Belinda sits on the throne and is told by the robots that she is getting married to the great AI generator. The AI generator has no mercy, yada yada yada, and has an exact duplicate of Belinda's star certificate even down to the torn edge, which leads one to believe that it is actually the same certificate that Belinda is currently holding in her hand. Apparently, this marriage will consist of Belinda having metal welded to her, and she will obey the machine. Belinda tries to say no, but the robots tell her that enforced wedlock will commence, and Belinda shouts, why is everything on this planet so stupid? At this point, Sasha 55 steps in and says that the designated historian can explain. The Disney doctor steps forward as the designated historian. He goes on to explain that something changed 10 years ago with the revolution, and every ninth word is part of a message because the faulty robots can't hear every ninth word. He tells her the rebels will be fighting back soon, and we see the people in the hall reaching for guns hidden in their waistbands. The fighting commences, and at the end of the battle, the Doctor, Belinda, 2 rebels, and a polish bot escape. Sasha 55 has been killed. And this is where things start to go off the rails. The quintet is transported to a rebel base. Their surviving white male, I shit you not, his name is actually Manny, gets off a snide line to Belinda about how she better be worth it. Belinda starts shouting at him that none of this is her fault, and the Doctor says, okay, and Belinda tells him not to shush her. The Doctor walks away and cries, and it's apparent that he and Sasha 55 were close, and that she was supposed to be his next traveling companion. Belinda walks over to the Doctor and tells him she's sorry about his friend. The Doctor notices the polish machine is still operating, and he shuts it off, so the other robots don't track it and find them. He even says sorry when he does it. The Doctor then turns to Belinda and tells her they have a world to overthrow. The 2 walk by where the injured are being treated, and Belinda gets to work being a nurse. She walks past the Doctor and tells him she's supposed to be starting a new shift on Monday, and the Doctor has a flash to Mundy Flynn, who looks exactly like Belinda. Belinda notices the Doctor watching her and makes a snide comment about doctors always standing back and watching while the nurses do all the work. Then she finally asks the Doctor his name, and he tells her it's just the Doctor. She says she's called the nurse, and the Doctor says, Doctor and nurse, good team. Belinda goes back to nursing patients while the fight above shakes the ceiling. She has the good sense to ask if anatomy on this planet is the same as Earth before she puts a man's shoulder back in place. She's surprised when the man's blanket doubles for an X-ray, and the Doctor points out the anatomical differences, then holds up the blanket in front of himself and shows her his 2 hearts. Since he's not from the planet, Belinda asks the Doctor why he's there. He tells her it's a long story, and he has to be careful of timelines, so he can't tell her how he knows any of this, but she's important and he's there for her. The Doctor then shows her that her star certificate is the exact same one that the AI has. He tells her that even though she only left her house 2 hours ago, it's been 6 months for him. There was some sort of time fracture, and everything is out of sync. The Doctor has been living there for 6 months, and Sasha took care of him during that time. Then Manny comes along and says Sasha died because of Belinda, and she's as bad as the robots. Manny f***s off, and the Doctor says the problem is the star certificate, which he keeps calling a diploma. Somehow the robots got a hold of the diploma in the future, went through the time fracture to 5,000 years earlier, and it became a foundation myth for their society. Then Belinda says she's seen films, and when you get 2 versions of the same thing crossing over in time, that they explode. The Doctor takes the diploma to keep it safe. Just as Belinda asks the Doctor if he's some sort of time detective, he says no, and there's another attack above that causes everyone to take cover. It appears that Manny says, "This is all your fault, Queen Belinda." When the attack is over, Belinda goes and turns the polish bot back on. The robots find them, and Belinda says she did it on purpose. Manny says, "You betrayed us," and Belinda responds that she was saving them. Lucky for her, no one is killed, and she surrenders herself to the robots. Belinda is taken before the AI generator, along with the Doctor and the polish bot. Belinda treats the polish bot nicely, like one would treat a pet. The AI generator tells her how conversion will bring serenity, a world without sadness, and she'll have peace and joy with the AI generator. She tells the robot behind her she's doing this for them, and to stop the war. The robot says they won't forget her sacrifice, and addresses her using her full name. She says to remember her as Belinda, and they can dump the Miss, because she never liked it anyway. The AI generator then asks if she's married, and the Doctor says, "What?" The AI generator repeats, "Are you married?" And Belinda says, "That's what he said." And she is horrified. The Doctor realizes that it's not an AI generator. It's AL generator. It's actually Belinda's ex, Alan. The front of the AL generator opens, and inside is half an Alan, covered in metal and hooked into the machine. Belinda says, "Oh my God, Alan, are you all right?" He responds that he is supreme. She asks him what he's doing there and says she thought he went to Margate. And he corrects her, no, he went to Stargate. The robots came for him, and Belinda realizes it's her fault the robots went to get Alan. He arrived 10 years ago. He was the cause of the revolution. When he arrived on the planet, he saw it was like a game with robots and lasers, and it was all his. He got to make the rules and win. It made him feel strong and powerful. Then he started killing anyone who annoyed him. Belinda asks Alan why he did this, and the doctor asked why she dumped him. We then get a flashback to a marriage proposal where Alan is down on one knee with a ring, telling Belinda that once they are married, she will have to dress more modestly and will no longer be allowed to text after 8 p.m. And she tells him, no. She then says all Alan ever did was correct her and tut and huff and roll his eyes and tell her off. And Alan has a big grin on his face and is nodding while she says this. She says, "You've taken coercive control and made it complete control of the whole planet." She asks him how he can live with himself, and the doctor says he can't. Every ninth word is free. And with that ninth word, Alan is begging for help. But then he's being awful, and Belinda shouts, "Planet of the Incels." The doctor says he can separate the biolinks and some other convoluted crap, but Alan wants nothing to do with it. Belinda says she has no choice, and Alan holds out the diploma and tells her to touch it and become his bride. The doctor then pulls Belinda's duplicate of the diploma out of his jacket and drops it on the floor. The polish bot Roombas its way over and picks it up. The polish bot then goes to polish the floor in front of Belinda as she walks toward Alan. She takes the diploma out of the polish bot and heads to Alan, where she touches her diploma to the duplicate Alan is holding. Time seems to freeze and then go in waves for Belinda and Alan, and the doctor runs at them. He grabs Belinda and pulls her away. The doctor sees Belinda's timeline, and Alan is reduced to a sperm and an egg on the floor, and the polish bot wipes him up. The doctor says, "Goodbye, Alan," and they both laugh. The robots are now free of Alan and will make reparations and will live in harmony with the people to rebuild the world. Even Manny is now nice and tells Belinda he was wrong. The doctor gets his TARDIS back. He tells Belinda there's still the mystery of how the robots got hold of her diploma in the future. She tells him to solve the mystery after he takes her home. Belinda goes in the TARDIS and wants to go home to 52425. He then tells her he's been to the future and met Belinda's descendant. Then Belinda gets suspicious of this destined meeting and asks the doctor if this is what he says to all the girls. Is that what he said to Sasha? Sasha, who trusted him, and then she died. She's mad he tested her DNA without her permission and proceeds to tell the doctor that he's dangerous. The doctor apologizes, and Belinda says, "I am not one of your adventures." He says he'll take her home. He repeatedly tries to go to Earth on the date Belinda stipulated, but the TARDIS can't get there. The doctor opens the TARDIS doors to see what's going on. They are halfway between Miss Belinda Chandra and Earth. Something is bouncing them off Earth. Belinda gets belligerent and tells the doctor to get her home. The doctor says he is, but they have to go the long way around. And the TARDIS dematerializes. Once the TARDIS disappears, we see a car, a pyramid, the Statue of Liberty, the Eiffel Tower, the diploma, and a whole bunch of debris floating through space, along with a calendar marked off through 52325. And that is the end of the Planet of the Incels. Oh my god. I guess we'll just start at the beginning where Russell Davies killed the cat, because that is where I realized that this is not going to be any better. That, after he dragged Sutek, the big dog, to death behind the TARDIS at the end of last season, that apparently this guy has no problem just offing animals. That just was disgusting to me. And I don't know what the hell is wrong with him. You don't just kill an animal and just be like, oh, well. I mean, at least Belinda, she at least said, hey, you killed that cat. It wasn't my cat. And then she tells the next door neighbor to tell the girl whose cat it was that the cat went to live on a farm. You know, so at least that was something. But at the same time, there was no reason to do that. So I don't know what the hell. You didn't need to do that. And then it just got worse from there. And it's sad because I could see parts of this that I felt like you could edit out the real garbage and there might have actually been a story there. In fact, I have a feeling if I went through and did some editing, I probably could make something that wasn't offensive. But as this was offensive to a lot of people on a lot of levels.
The opening credits stated the title and said written by Russell Davies. But the way this episode unfolded, it felt like it should have said written by Stephen Moffat. Stephen Moffat has been known to do these, I guess we'll call them puzzles, to try to be kind about what Stephen Moffat did during his time, most of which didn't pay off in any useful way, some of which did. They were J.J. Abrams type mystery boxes that most times didn't lead anywhere, and this episode was full of that. And going back to what you said about the cat, I think the problem for me, I mean, I don't want to see animals mistreated also, but it takes on an extra meaning here because this episode's social commentary was in a few places, but one of the things it was trying to get across was this overbearing male that was trying to control his wife and how that's wrong, and he turned into some giant monster. So Russell and crew were wagging their finger trying to tell everybody how that was wrong. So they're taking the moral high ground. So they've now decided that this episode is going to be based on moral high ground. Okay, now I'm going to scrutinize a bit closer because you made it about moral high ground. Well, there were two things that I thought were very odd for a moral high ground episode. One of which was blowing that cat away and just kind of nonchalantly not making a big deal about it. In fact, they made a joke about it, which reminded me of that episode of The Orville where, I think it was called Firestorm, where the crew was seeing visions of different things, and Bortus was seeing this alligator, and he was trying to tell people that he crushed an alligator, and they wouldn't really, I'm not sure who's doing that. Nevertheless, it's been crushed. That's what that set of lines that was uttered by them told me. And the second thing is, although Belinda made it clear throughout the episode she didn't like the term miss in front of her name, which also was some social commentary, moral high ground, but maybe we'll deal with that later in the video. Like 20 minutes into the episode, actually closer to 30, all of a sudden the Disney doctor was calling her Belle when she made it clear to everybody around her she preferred Belinda. And that sort of thing, this disjointed change, happened a couple of times in the episode, actually like 3 times I can count, which makes me wonder if scenes were cut out. Because I was watching this the second time through, waiting for when the doctor went from Belinda to calling her Belle. And it was right after the robots attacked and recaptured Belinda. And he called her Belle. Belle, what did you do? That was completely out of nowhere. And the reason I'm bringing this up as far as a morality thing is it's probably rude to call people by a name that they don't prefer. So calling her anything less than Belinda was actually demeaning to her. And for a crew of people making this show wagging their finger about how horrible the planet of incels is, it's just odd that they would go that route to purposely go out of their way to misname somebody against her wishes.
Yeah, that does seem a bit odd for that group, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping maybe there was a missed scene where maybe she said, you know, my friends call me Belle or something, and then you could have moved on from there. But what was on the screen...
They never showed that.
No.
No.
And there was a piece of this episode that I actually did enjoy. When they were in the tunnels after they escaped the first time, and the doctor and Belinda were talking, and the doctor was explaining to her how this race of people, how their biology was different, showing the new organ that was there. There
was another diaphragm.
And she was Another diaphragm, thank you. And she was asking questions about that, and then he kind of showed his own anatomy. For a quick moment, it sort of felt like the doctor explaining to somebody who's new to all this how things worked, and she was actually listening. But then this weird stuff kept happening where I was falling into this, hey, this almost feels like the doctor talking to a companion and a companion talking to the doctor. And then almost randomly, Belinda would have these bizarre lines that would come out of her mouth that had all this bitter anger to it. And then that line would go away and they'd go back to the good dialogue that they were having. It's almost like somebody was forcing those lines into the script because they didn't organically fit into the script.
Well, it makes me wonder who edited it, you know, because this was definitely an addition to the story that wasn't originally in there because the flow was weird. It was added crap, and it made Belinda seem pretty schizophrenic, actually, because you never knew what you were going to get.
Yep.
You know, for part of the time, she was actually a pretty nice person.
Well, I would argue for most of the time. I actually like this companion, except when she has these mental lapses.
Yeah, when she'd start turning into I'm just going to say it, a real bitch. Because, like Rose said in End of the World, when Rose said in End of the World, don't argue with the designated driver, when she and the doctor were having a disagreement on their first outing together, off-world. You'd think that that would have occurred to Belinda, who is definitely not 19 years old. This woman's a nurse in an emergency room. She should know better than to be arguing with a designated driver when you're on a planet halfway across the universe.
Because there were pieces of story here that I think could have made a good story, but it didn't come together. Like, one of the things I did like about this episode is I did like the retro golden age aesthetics of the planet, the technology on that planet. I like the rocket ship, kind of looked like an old Flash Gordon cereal with the sparkler out the back design. The cityscape kind of had that imagined future from like the early to mid part of the 20th century, imagining what the 2000s would be like.
The atomic influenced future view that we used to have, yeah. Which is actually pretty cool because I'm really into that kind of thing. I really love the atomic age aesthetic. And a lot of that they got really down. But then the robots didn't look like that. And the green screen stuff didn't really look all that great either.
I wish the robots would have looked more like Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet.
Yeah.
Because it would have fit in. Because you and I were talking as we were watching this. And what the aesthetics felt like they should have been is, if anybody remembers Star Trek Voyager, remember when Tom Paris used to go on the holodeck and he would play Captain Proton? And there was one episode, because Molly and I were laughing about this, where he was playing Captain Proton and Seven came into the holodeck. And there was this robot that was doing all sorts of things, and Seven didn't want to play the game. So
I don't think she understood the game. I think that was the problem. There was a confrontation between her and the robot, and then she just said, I am Borg, and then she just dismantled the thing. And Tom was not happy because obviously that's not the way you're supposed to play the game. But yeah, it was that aesthetic. It was like Captain Proton from the holodeck on Voyager.
And it was a nice aesthetic. I liked it. I actually liked it quite a bit. In fact, toward the end there, they were walking across this like lit bridge thing, and I was telling Molly that reminded me of that scene from Forbidden Planet. And that was a nice homage that was being paid to classic science fiction. So aesthetics-wise, there was a lot in here I actually did enjoy. I agree with you. I wish the robots would have been done differently. Having the shape that they had, and then having that face on their front panel, which reminded both of us of that Capaldi episode, Smile. Even though the robot was much smaller, it still had that kind of...
It was the face. The face was the same.
And it just, to me, it didn't fit in with the rest of the aesthetics they were setting up. But I did enjoy that. All of that, I can give a lot of praise for what they were doing there as far as the design. And then, I don't know what they were doing with the green screens. I don't know if they rushed this so they couldn't get... I don't know what didn't fit in. I don't know if because I'm not a visual designer, so I don't know exactly what went wrong here. But the sets felt very small. and somehow the background CGI didn't quite fit in with what the foreground was doing, but it's not like you could see matte lines or anything. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it didn't really look all that great to me. It actually made the sets feel very, very, very small.
Well, in some places, especially when she was sitting on the throne, the image behind her, it looked like those painted backdrops that they used to use, but not very detailed. It looked kind of more silhouette than anything else. But then, there were lights flashing on the buildings behind her. So I think they were trying to make it look like this was dusk and it was kind of far away, but it just looked like one of the old school painted backdrops to me.
And I did appreciate, even though it was a Stephen Moffat type puzzle, the idea that they set up this thing. This is one of the riddles or one of these mystery boxes that Davies, in quotation marks, actually paid off, where every ninth word the robots weren't able to follow. So there was an exchange at the beginning where the doctor was sending a message to Belinda every ninth word, and you had to piece together the sentence. And then later on in the episode, they explained why that was Alan, when he was in that machine combined state, every ninth cycle, he was free from the machine to be himself. So that's why that was. And I thought that was an interesting concept. I'm not sure exactly they pulled it off all that great, but it was an interesting concept.
Well, it was a lot like the concept from the final episode, well, actually the second to the last episode, I believe it was, of season 1 with Eccleston, when they were on Satellite 5, and the woman that was all hooked up into the machine had to wait for, I believe it was the solar flare, to come around so that she could contact the doctor,
yep.
so that the Daleks couldn't hear what she was saying. So it reminded me of that concept, which, again, there's so much that it just feels like they took from previous seasons.
Well, you pointed out, because I didn't pick up at this at first, but then when we watched it a second time, I was like, yup. You pointed out several times during the episode, they played several notes. And I realize Murray Gold is the common composer here, but they played several notes that sounded like that song from Stephen Moffat's 2010 Christmas Carol, the one that the blonde lady sang to open up the clouds.
It was the melody of the song that she sang. Yeah, just, but I mean, it was enough notes that you would recognize it. And I don't know if they did that because, with Murray Gold back in charge of the music, he wants to put his own mark on it again. However, I would question, well, why are you using that? Because it kind of came across like it was just member berries, like these just few notes in the background that will make you feel like you're watching Doctor Who again. It kind of felt manipulative, and it really felt out of place. So that kind of pissed me off. I mean, because I love that music. It was nice hearing that music again, but it just felt like I was being manipulated by that music.
And going back to the morality, or the supposed morality, the way that Alan was defeated, and then when he was supposedly just these microscopic pieces on this platform, then that polisher came over and was like, polish, polish. And then everybody was laughing. Like it was some old sitcom where usually you would laugh at the end and then the frame would freeze, and then you'd have the credits because you left on a happy note. That's what this felt like. And it's like, that's a human life.
This is someone that she was in a relationship with, and it was serious enough that he proposed marriage to her. And even though it sounds like he was a critical jerk in their relationship, what they showed to us wasn't really that bad. I mean, it really wasn't. If he was being a critical jerk, just tell him, stop, you're being a critical jerk. That's not okay. But she didn't do that. I feel like what they did there was make light of domestic violence. And they actually did a disservice to anyone who's experienced that or is experiencing that or will experience that or works in that field. Because what they showed was, it was laughable. It's like that's what set this guy off to take over this whole planet and start killing people? Are you kidding me? It was, I won't say the R word, but it was stupid.
Ridiculous.
Yes,
that's the R word you want.
Yes, ridiculous. It was ridiculous. It really was. then, like, I don't even understand. Clearly, this guy really wasn't an incel, because I thought the whole incel thing was that they couldn't even get a date. And he made it all the way to proposing marriage to his girlfriend. That doesn't sound incel to me. Like, what do these people mean when they say the word incel?
I don't know what Russell thought he was doing in this episode, but this episode was offensive on numerous levels. Going back to, we might as well get into this. So the concept of I don't want to have Miss as part of my name. We all know what that's about here. It has to do with this modern idea of gender ideology, and that's what this was a target of. And I don't care one way or the other than it didn't need to be in this. They could have just said Belinda Chandra on that certificate and been done with this. You didn't need to educate us on the outdated term of Miss.
Yeah,
wagging your finger as you're killing animals, as you're misnomering people when they don't want to be called that, and when they're making small of life by laughing when some robot sucks up the remnants of what that person was. You don't have the moral high ground when you do stuff like that.
No.
To lecture any of us on gender ideology or domestic abuse. You don't have any high ground to give us any lessons on that when you do that in the same episode.
Yeah. And then calling Manny. I mean, it really? Why didn't they just call him Big Stupid Man and just be done with it?
Well, there were a few things in here.
White guy.
That I was laughing at because it reminded me of, purposely ridiculous stuff they did in the Venture Brothers. Because remember Bud Manstrong? So when I heard that Manny name, you just pick a name that's just kind of super macho old school. Okay, sure, why not? And then we were both joking that the whole story here, when you find out what it's about, it's that episode from the Venture Brothers where they had a flashback episode where they were in college, and this one kid had this infatuation with this student. And as he grew up, he built this robot army because he was so infatuated. Was it Leslie Cohen?
He was... Alright, so one of Rusty Venture's friends was madly in love with this girl named Leslie Cohen. And he was doing all of her homework, and he was, I guess the modern term for it would be simp. He was simping for her like crazy, and she wasn't into him.
Look closely at their faces.
Leslie Cohen?
Don't they look just like her? I loved her!
Then why don't you just let us all go, pick up the phone, and call her up like someone who's not a total freak?
Because of the restraining order.
Which implied that he harassed this poor woman to the point where she had to get a restraining order.
Yes, but the really funny thing is that because she wouldn't have anything to do with him, he was a robotics expert, and he actually built a whole fleet of robots that looked exactly like her.
And that's what this episode, we both were laughing because that's what it reminded us of. There were a few things that reminded us of the Venture Brothers, including
when the AI generator, the L generator.
Yeah, when you saw what Alan was, and then...
Well, it opened up, and that was almost identical to what happened with Jonas Venture. Big time spoiler here, everybody. So if you haven't watched the Venture Brothers and you don't want this spoiled, I'll put in a break so you can skip ahead to the next chapter. So here comes the spoiler. So anyways, this scientist, Jonas Venture, he had created this machine called the Problem. And if anything happened to him, his body was to be placed inside the machine. It was a life support machine. And unfortunately for him, he got frozen, and when his buddies were trying to put him into the Problem, they dropped him and he shattered. And so all they were able to get into the Problem was his head. So his head was all hooked up into the machine. So when the L generator opened up, all I could think of was, oh my god, it's Jonas Venture inside the Problem. And sure enough, inside was Alan, and just a torso and a head hooked up to this machine. And you know what? Honestly, he had really good teeth for somebody who's been in that machine for probably 10 years, because when the Problem opened up and you saw Jonas Venture, his teeth were nasty because he was in there with no hands and no toothbrush.
That was more realistic than what they did here.
Yeah. And a friggin' animated cartoon.
I do think this episode was better than the past two. The Sutek finale, although it had a couple of good ideas like the time window, was a really bad episode.
At least they mercifully executed this cat just quick. It was over.
Versus dragging it through some sort of horrible
Time
torture.
stream, then having it burn up. Yeah.
And then Joy to the World, our review, there was nothing positive I could say about Joy to the World. It was just a really, really, really bad piece of television. But this, actually, there were pieces here, because I agree with Molly. I think if we sat with a video editor and spliced out all those bizarre schizophrenic things that Belinda was saying when she would get all angry for like 5 seconds and then she'd go back to normal.
All the weird snarky crap that I think that they thought was making her a strong female character, and it was just actually making her a damn bitch. Because strong people, secure people, they don't behave that way. Insecure people do. And that's what they wrote.
There were some just really bizarre shifts. But anyway, if you took all those out and you modified the ending, so you cut out the ridiculous controlling boyfriend and you just made it about this poor guy. Because one of the questions we had was, so toward the end, they went out of their way to explain in narrative that Alan was asking for help. He was giving a message out there, help me. So if Alan wasn't doing this anymore, who was? Like, who was the baddie here? I guess the machines? But the machines didn't start killing anybody until Alan showed up.
Yeah.
So we would have to edit that piece out and change the ending so it made some sense.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would do.
But a lot of the story we could piece together and probably make an okay story. I can't say a great story, but like a 4 or 5 out of 10, we could piece this together because there was stuff here that you could piece together. One of the things I wish they would have done was when they were in those tunnels, I wish they would have spent more time down there learning about the resistance people, learning more about Manny other than he's a big mouth, tall, white male. Because that's all he was.
Because, yeah, that time in the tunnels kind of reminded me of the David Tennant episode where his daughter is created.
When the doctor was talking about Sasha 55 and Belinda said, oh, yeah, she was nice to me. When? When was she nice to you? It's like we're missing a scene. She gave her life up for you, but you didn't sit down and have a conversation with her. That would have been nice to be in the tunnels and maybe have a scene where Belinda and Sasha 55 are talking, and maybe you get to realize that she's a pretty nice person.
I think she was nice to her insofar as she wasn't nasty to her when she first got there and Belinda was asking questions. Sasha wasn't a jerk. That's their definition of being nice these days.
Because it was weird, because when they first started the revolt in that royal chamber or whatever that was, and the doctor, Sasha 55, and Belinda were all together, and Sasha 55 saying, she said something like, yeah, you can trust this guy, he's really good, or something like that. And I'm scratching my head going, you met Sasha 55 like 5 minutes before the doctor. Why would you listen to her about, yeah, trust him? They're both strangers to you. Why would you do that?
Well, and it's weird because that's not the first time we've had some female who has spoken about the doctor that way. Oh, I would trust him with my life. I think the first time we saw that was possibly the library episode with River's Song, which again makes you question, why is Russell's name on this and not Stephen Moffat's? Because it felt so much like his stuff. This had a
lot of the Clara Impossible girl in it too, especially at the end.
Yeah, but the doctor is being treated like he's some sort of cult leader. Like with these women worshiping him, and it's just, and going out and dying for him. I mean, it's really weird.
At the end, when they were in the TARDIS, Belinda and the doctor, and Belinda said something like, is that what you say to all these women, or something? Like the doctor's some sort of player. Like,
well, and again, there was a mirror of the conversation that Donna had with the doctor when she first met him. But in that instance, it was a very different situation because she didn't know what happened to Rose. She had no idea what was going on. They were in the middle of her being chased by these robots. And she was very suspicious of the doctor. She'd only really just met him. She'd gotten sucked into his TARDIS, and both of them were like, what just happened? So that was a different context, and the conversation worked in that situation.
Well, going back to Donna, like sometimes Donna would get all bent out of shape, and so she would make these ridiculous requests to the doctor that he couldn't fulfill. At the end of the TARDIS, when the doctor explained to her and showed her how I'm having trouble, I'm trying to get you back home, but I can't get home, and this weird schizophrenic thing that happened with Belinda, she's like, get me home right now! And that came out of nowhere because her core personality that was shown so far did not exhibit that sort of irrational behavior like Donna Noble had.
Exactly. And by the end of that episode, Donna, her defenses were actually down when talking to the doctor. She even admitted that, Lance didn't deserve what happened to him because Lance died. Her fiance, who turned out to be a jerk, died. And at first she was like, he deserved it. And then she's like, no, he didn't. And she actually let her guard down with the doctor to the point where he wanted her to go with him. And she said she couldn't because, his world is just too scary for her. She couldn't. And so, there was a lot of honesty and openness between Donna and the doctor by the end of that episode. By the end of this episode, that's where Belinda was actually starting to really first show this belligerence toward the doctor. This guy just helped you get through this situation with your ex who wanted to do unspeakable things with you, and he's been killing all these people, and now you're going to turn on this guy? Are you nuts? And again, he's the guy with the spaceship that's going to take you home. It made no sense.
When she flipped out several times in this episode, the joke I was making to Molly was, what are these reshoots that they're just inserting in? And Molly was like, no. However, there might be an editor or a second writer inserting in this crap because every time she did that, it was really a bad, jerky thing. That I don't mean that she was a jerk, although she was.
It was very jarring.
Yeah, jarring, I guess is the better word.
Yeah. Because
it was out of place. It didn't fit the situation they were in. It's almost like they inserted it just to insert it.
Yes.
Because in the tunnels there, when Belinda first was talking to the doctor in those tunnels and he was explaining to her how this new place worked, I was liking that scene. That might have been the only time since Ncuti Gat has been playing the doctor where I felt he actually was channeling the doctor.
Yeah.
And we're in season 2 now in a Christmas special. 2 Christmas specials, excuse me. And this is the first time, starting a second season, where he had a little window of maybe a minute to 2 minutes where he actually was channeling the doctor. He was coming across as a teacher and showing the companion, not demeaning her like she was stupid, but saying, look, this is all new to you. Let me explain to you how biology on these people work. And the companion was actually listening. Mm-hmm. So if I cut out all those schizophrenic things that Belinda was doing, I actually like her as a companion so far.
Yeah.
But not if she's going to keep having these weird schizophrenic hiccups, because that gets annoying real fast.
Well, it's sad because, like I said, there were moments where both Belinda and the doctor, I could see where there was potential there, that we could have had a good story, that we could actually have a good duo in the TARDIS, and that this could feel like Doctor Who used to feel. But then the writing would totally screw it up.
And I don't know what they're going to do, if this is a one and done when it comes to her behaving like that, or if this is just, well, you should feel grateful that you got a few moments where she wasn't a jerk, because guess what we're going to do for the rest of the episode? Because if she's going to go through the rest of the season trying to lecture all of us on how proper people behave, then people are going to reject this character really, really fast. It's a shame, because there were pieces of this episode that I can recommend watching, especially being so starved for Doctor Who for so long. There are little pieces here that I think you could get something out of. But as an episode itself, I can't recommend the episode. I mean, I think there was too many poison pills in here. Maybe if somebody made an edited version like you were proposing, maybe then I could recommend it. I mean, the golden age of sci-fi and seeing some of the aesthetics, sure, that was nice, but does that make up for this social commentary? It got worse as the show went on. So, at the beginning, like you mentioned with the wrapping paper, you don't notice that till the second time through what that meant. And then when she was leaving clues about not wanting to be called Miss, I didn't catch that was a big deal until we got toward the end of the episode. Then I realized in retrospect, I know what she's getting at. Because I would argue it didn't go off the rails completely till they were in the tunnels. When she was in the tunnels, she wanted to sacrifice herself because she didn't want any more people killed. But the way she did that is she turned back on this robot, and the other robots already killed Sasha 55. That's how Sasha died.
And a whole bunch of other people, too.
So she had no way, Belinda had no way of knowing that turning on that polishing robot again so that robots could track their location so she could give herself up, she had no way of knowing other than plot armor that nobody else would be killed.
Yeah.
And so that made no sense. It made her a horrible human being when she did that.
Well, it made her stupid.
She endangered all these people by doing that. I mean, why didn't she try to work the transporter to get out of that place to give herself up? But other than plot armor, those robots came in again and they didn't kill anybody. They just said, okay. And then one could say, well, yeah, because she commanded. Remember, she's the queen. She commanded, nobody died. No. I mean, yes. But in the palace room, when she was trying to go away, the robots made it very clear, your power is very limited. Mm-hmm. So there was no guarantee they were going to listen to her. So that made no sense in the story why she did that. They were going out of her way to set up that she didn't want to see people dying on her behalf. And then she risked that whole resistance cell just because she wanted to give herself up. I just shrugged my shoulders and said, this doesn't make any sense.
Well, she knew they'd be safe because there weren't any cats around.
Yeah, if there was a cat there, they'd have to blow right through them. If you're going to give morality lessons, Russell,
do it right.
Then you better make sure that you're giving morality lessons. This so reminded me of Star Trek Discovery, when they would wag their fingers trying to teach us about some things, yet they were pushing war crimes galore.
Well, that brings me to my next point. That in a lot of ways, this actually did feel like Star Trek Discovery, because in Star Trek Discovery, the writing level seems to be meant for a certain age group, a maturity level, a reading level that is well below the required emotional level for the subject matter. Like, it's written for kids, but the content is definitely for adults.
And that's what Stephen Moffat used to do. If you remember, when Stephen Moffat had his run, remember when River Song, she had that situation with her hand and it was broken? Like, there are so many instances where...
Oh, she broke her own wrist to get away from the doctor.
And you don't want to show that to a kid.
No.
And there were so many things under Stephen Moffat's run it was inappropriate for children.
Talk about a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And so if you're going to go out of your way to wag your finger and give morality lessons, then you better make sure your episode from start to end is promoting this high moral high ground that you think you have. Because after watching this episode, Russell and his people are the moral superiors to nobody. Nobody. And that's what I thought of the Star Trek Discovery writers when they did their stuff. Mm-hmm. Whenever they go into their lectures about what was morally right, I laughed at them because they didn't have any sort of right to get on a pedestal and try to tell me what was moral, because it's clear they don't know what is moral.
Well, it's clear to me these people are exposing themselves for the hypocrites that they really are.
Yeah.
Like, big time.
So in that sense, this episode got me a bit bent out of shape. If you're going to go out of your way to lecture me, then you better make sure you have that moral high ground. And Russell does not have the moral high ground in this episode. He did several things that, if I'm going to use their own rules against them, were disrespectful and downright disgusting in some ways. So don't lecture me about what you think you're giving me as far as mistreatment of this or that. You have no right to give any lecture whatsoever. So with that said, would I recommend this episode? No. No, there are pieces of it that maybe you could find on YouTube, some scenes that might be kind of cool. Maybe that scene in the tunnels when the doctor is talking to Belinda, where I thought he felt like the doctor. But nah, sitting through like 46, 47 minutes of this, this is like a 2-star, maybe 3 stars at the most episode, and I'm giving it out of 10, not out of 5, out of 10. And I'm being very kind by giving it 2 or 3 stars, at least for me. What do you think, Molly?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, like I said, there were times where the new actress, the new companion, she can act. I'll give her that one.
I liked her for about a lot of this.
There were times that I actually liked her character, but then, unfortunately, the words that she was forced to say, they were bad. And the same went for the doctor. There were a few times where I was like, oh, you know what? I can actually see how this guy actually could pull off playing the doctor, but then the story got in the way. And that's what seems to be happening so much these days, is the story just gets in the way.
The poorly written story gets in the way.
Yes, the extremely badly written story is what ruins the whole thing. You know, I won't even go too far into the things that the actors have said in interviews. And just that, to me, it's obvious that they're living in a bubble and they don't actually know what the hell they're talking about. Because even this... You know, even it's clear that the writers don't know what they're talking about, because how could this possibly be Planet of the Incels when I didn't see a single incel in this whole episode?
Even Alan wasn't an incel.
No.
He was going to get married.
Yeah, they broke up, but that doesn't make you an incel.
It's like that. Was it The Princess Bride? I do not think that word thinks what you think it means.
I do not think that word means what you think it means. Yeah. Because... on our planet, incel means involuntarily celibate. And
not just physically, like even emotionally.
Yeah.
You can't.
These are guys who cannot get a single date, let alone get to the point where he's down on one knee and proposing. Alan wasn't an incel. He did have a relationship. It went badly, but he still had one. That's not an incel. So these people... they really need to understand that words matter, language matters, narrative matters. And I guess they think that it doesn't matter as much as the message. But you know what? Your message doesn't get across if you are using language incorrectly, or even if you're just not using it the same way as your audience.
Or if you're inconsistent with your ethics and morality.
Yeah. And
how do I know which one of your lessons to learn? Because I'm not going to go out of my way and abuse animals if that's the lesson you're teaching me. I'm not going to go out of my way to misname somebody when they don't want to be called a certain name or they have a preference to be called a certain name. I'm not going to do that either. Which lesson do I learn?
Well, they weren't teaching that lesson, so... But back to what I was saying. If they want to try to get people to start thinking a different way, then you have to use language that your audience understands. And that starts with meeting them where they are. Don't go talking down to them. Don't start using words to mean different things than the way your audience uses them. Basically, everything that these writers are doing and these actors are doing right now, do the opposite. Because what you're doing is actually very insulting. And you're never, ever, 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 ever going to reach people that way.
I don't think they're trying to reach anybody.
No, they want to punish people. They just want to hurt people. And that's what this exposes.
They don't even notice their own hypocrisy. That's what gets me. This episode was full of hypocrisy. And Russell and his people, I don't think, know that. They have no concept of what they did here was very inconsistent, very offensive. Not an offensive as in, yeah, take your medicine. It's hard to take, showing you how to be a good person. No, you showed us how to be bad, too, in this episode, and you were promoting it as something good.
Well, they didn't even realize that it was bad.
Correct.
That's the worst part, I think, is that they didn't even notice that what they did was wrong. And that's where the real problem is. So, anyway, I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I guess before you go, I already said that I wouldn't recommend this. I'd give it maybe 3 stars. What would you say?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend this either. Unless you are looking to laugh at it or you want to see how stupid it was just because you've got morbid curiosity to do so. But as far as...
At least it was short.
Yeah.
It wasn't like an hour. It was only like 45 minutes or so. So at least it's short.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least there's that. But at the same time... was it worth wasting 46 minutes of your life on? No, it wasn't. So basically got the gist of it from what we said in this video. There are plenty of other people making videos as well who are talking about this. Just listen to some YouTubers to get it down. You don't need to actually watch this, especially if you have to pay for it. Don't.
Yeah, in the US, if you're in the UK and you get it from the BBC, I would say for free, but obviously it's a licensing fee. If you already have your license paid up, then maybe watch it to get some laughs. But unless you already have Disney Plus, don't subscribe to watch this. It's not worth it.
Even then, don't watch it on Disney Plus. Don't let them think that people are actually wanting to see more of this crap. Don't let them think that they're getting viewers on this, because this is not worth watching. We don't want them getting positive reinforcement for creating crap like this, so don't give it to them.
And I'm just going to say this. I do not think the fan base of Doctor Who deserves what I'm going to say. So I'm saying this not to say you guys deserve this, okay? But the writing staff and the production staff of this series, this show has rumors of being put to sleep after this season. And if this is indicative of what we're getting this last season, it deserves to be put asleep for a while. Because it would be better to have no Doctor Who
than have more of this.
Yes.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, you were speaking what I was thinking. So for all the Doctor Who fans out there, this is not aimed at you. You guys deserve better than this.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying, because you guys deserve better, this needs to stop. Because all this is doing is wrecking the franchise you love even more. Russell is hurting the franchise every installment that he puts out there.
Yep, it's really sad. Not the same person who did the revival back in 2005.
No, I mean, something went way wrong with him.
But before we get into that, because that'll just make this like another hour, yeah, it's sad. It's sad. So no, we don't recommend this. And, well, at least this episode's over. Now just the rest of the season to go. We'll get you out the next video for the next episode next weekend. Until then,
take care.